Welcome to Scroll Sessions. We're with Jay Davis today. I'm Shane Hickenlooper with my co-host.
I'm Dan Page. Thanks for being here, Jay.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you. I think let's let you give an intro of yourself because you've got an awesome background and what you're currently doing is really cool. So
I started my career at Vivint way back in the day when it was Apex Alarm.
Oh my gosh, that's a throwback name. I forgot about that.
And did product dev there and got to be on the product team. Back when I was the only person on the product team.
Wow.
So for a minute there, it was just me and then my boss. And then after that, I helped start a company called The Color Run. It was one of the initial employees there. And it kind of got me into this like world of viral marketing and kind of fell in love with doing things that just went crazy and blew up. And then did more viral videos, viral projects. And then in 2016, 2017, I started thinking about kind of what I wanted to do next and decided to start an agency called Creatably. We focus on hypergrowth for startups. And as we did that and worked with a lot of great clients, both here in Utah and outside of Utah, eventually we kind of decided to do two things. One was start investing in companies so that we could take part in that growth. And our first investment here in Utah was a company called The Color, which was super fun. They've seen amazing growth. And then we also decided, I was like, I want to start our own brands. And so we launched Pillow Cube in-house, and Pillow Cube has grown like crazy and taken off and is now the second most searched pillow on the internet. So
wow.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's behind what?
Wild. My Pillow.
Oh, really?
My Pillow is still number one. So
that's funny because
it's going down.
Don't even know what My Pillow is.
Yeah. It's that guy, Mike Lindelof, I think is his name. Lindelof.
Yeah, he's in like Walmart and like he's like in all the major big retailers, and then he's a big conspiracy nut.
Yeah. Yeah. We get a lot of people who are like,
yeah.
The real question is, what does Jay think about,
I'm
overthrowing the U.S. government? I'm like,
sure.
I don't want to. That's my position.
Yeah.
So
pillows
it's
don't
been kind of
relate
wild.
to that.
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah.
Not been my thing.
The US government.
So we launched Pillow Cube. Pillow Cube's grown like crazy. And then since then we invested in some other companies. We ended up buying one of those companies called StairSlide.
Oh, such a cool company.
And then we bought another toy company and we're adding that into the StairSlide portfolio.
Cool.
And we've kind of created an incubator where we just start and grow stuff and buy stuff. And
that's so awesome.
Super fun.
It's cool to get to that point where you can, like, I guess, basically take your marketing and then make it work for you instead of for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was something that like always appealed to me was, hey, if we're really this as good as we say we are with marketing, why don't we at some point do it for ourselves? And so that was something that just naturally, and I'm more of an entrepreneur. I'm not necessarily like an agency guy. I was never worked at a big agency.
Yeah.
Like a big ad agency. And so I just never, I don't know. It was never something that was like, I want to be an agency owner for the next 50 years as like my primary thing. I think I get too bored.
Yeah.
I like doing stuff for like 4 or 5 years and then I'm like, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
And so
Totally.
I've been doing it 4 years and I'm already like, we gotta do more.
Shane, you were that way like 2 years ago. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. 2 years in, I was that way. So I find that really interesting because this is a concept that we've played a lot with of if we're really as good at marketing as we say we are, not only are we going to do it for ourselves, but we're going to go and approach brands and say, hey, we want equity in your company.
Yeah.
And we're going to prove our worth by scaling it. Or maybe taking the reverse approach of scaling the company and then bringing it up to them and saying, hey, we'd like to talk equity. So how does that conversation start for agency owners like us, where we've had that same idea of how do we approach companies that we are really killing it for, or that we'd want to kill it for, and talk about partnering?
Yeah. So kind of our approach, and I think it's worked really well. I think where it always gets hard to do services for equity is when you overinflate the value of the services. And so there's some groups out there, incubators, accelerators, who essentially are like, hey, we can give you these services, but we're charging you like 10 times what we normally charge. And that always seems to break down. Like it always seems to get to a point when you can't quantify like, okay, here's the value of what we're giving you. And so the nice thing for Creatably has always been that we're like, hey, this is what we are charging today. Like we have 3 other people coming in this month and they're paying us $350,000 for this package. And so if we're going to give you that same package for free or for half off, it has a real value. It's not just us like making up a value. It's here's the exact package we gave someone else. And then here's the price you're paying. And the difference is real value. Like we could say no to you, bring on an extra client this month and make $200,000. So it's really a very like real value. And I think that's the biggest thing that I would say. So if you do want to do that, is like, here's our package. Here's what we normally charge. Here's what we're going to do it for. And then do that up front. And just because I think it gets a lot harder once you do blow someone up. It all of a sudden changes. They're like,
the whole dynamic changes.
Yeah.
For sure.
So that's what I would say. If you want to do stuff for equity as an agency owner, which I think is amazing. Like I think it's awesome. We have a lot of clients and potential clients who really get excited by that because they're like, even if I don't end up doing it with you, the fact that you're willing to do it shows them that we're super confident in what we do.
And you're super confident in their product or service, right?
Yeah.
That you're like, we believe this could really work out, and that's why we want to potentially be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That's really cool.
And that also gives, for the agency owner, it makes it so that it's not like this unlimited bucket that they're just pulling from forever. I think that's what's hard and where it's different than like sweat equity in some ways, but in many ways it's very similar. Like if you went to a startup today, that was like brand new, but they were going to pay you. They're going to pay you something, but they're probably underpaying you, and then you're getting the rest in equity. And our approach is like, why can't we do that exact same thing with an agency? Like we'll give you all this work, and on the first one you're going to pay us less. On the second one you're going to pay us a little more, and that's just going to allow us to give you more value, and you can serve some cash. And then it also aligns incentives. Like as an agency, we're really excited to see this grow and scale. So
incentivized to do so. And that's like absolutely key, especially in the agency world, and especially when you're dealing with, I think, I guess, viral marketing, where you've got paid and organic working towards you, and you've got to have both very much dialed in to get the results that you need.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on that note, going back to where viral marketing first started to be a part of your vision and what you were doing, because getting to the point where you can say, hey, we'll charge you $350,000 for all this creative work takes a lot of confidence and skill set.
Yeah.
So getting to that point, was your first experience with video at Color Run?
Yeah. So when I was at Vivint, I didn't work on the video team, but I worked kind of around them. And so I got to kind of see some of the stuff that they were doing, and I really liked it. When the whole Vivint rebrand happened, I got to help with things from the product side. And so it was just really fun to kind of see that process. So then when I was at Color Run, that was the first time, like, I originally came in to help more with like product development and like managing races and building out the strategy. But then the owner was just like, hey, who wants to help with marketing? And no one really volunteered. And I was super interested. So I was like, hey, I'll hire a bunch of videographers and I'll kind of manage that creative side. And so hired just some amazing cinematographers, and I still work with a lot of them. And it was really fun just to like, hey, let's just create something that shows off what this is. That was at a very different time in kind of social media. I mean, we launched in December of 2011.
I still remember the campaigns. Like I still remember like the visual campaigns that I saw. Even that was like end of my high school years.
Yeah.
I still remember the visuals of what you guys created.
They stand out. I mean, that was what was so interesting about Color Run, was it was like
super new,
very visual. People here in Utah, because of the Holly Festival down in Spanish Fork or Springville, were more aware of it. But when you showed
Yeah.
that to people like outside of Utah, they're like, what in the world
Yeah,
is
this
that?
is really crazy and cool
Yeah.
at the same time.
And at the time, Facebook was used differently. Now we just use it to fight about politics. But back then,
That's LinkedIn too.
Yeah, that too. But back then, it was much more a thing for social currency. It was like, hey, what are you doing this weekend that's cool? What is something you're doing that's different than everyone else? And so people wanted to show off, like, look what I did this weekend.
Yeah.
And so we really leveraged that to be able to get as much virality as possible out of it. Also, at that time, every post was seen by every single one of your friends.
Yeah,
And so it's just a
totally
different the
now.
algorithm didn't exist. I mean, there was no algorithm. So
it was just get a bunch of friends, followers so that you can share it with them.
So if you posted, every single person that was your friend on Facebook saw your post.
Wow.
And so
what
things could just spread.
Thought.
Yeah.
Like they,
Crazy.
Yeah, like that works. Huh.
Like,
yeah.
Weird. We don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Facebook was like, I think we can make a lot more money if we limited this.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that shifted. Like for businesses, the idea of going viral is very different. I think there's still those opportunities. But in many ways, Facebook made it less, they made it harder to like have explosive viral growth, but they made it much easier and more predictable to have sustained growth. So
yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess how do you feel like the platforms now have kind of, I would say maybe kind of democratized virality at least a little bit with like TikTok and Reels? It almost feels like anyone can go viral now without having any paid marketing behind it. But
yeah, I think that that's very true, and it's always fun seeing what just goes viral. I mean, that's just like a whole
it's a whole nother ballgame,
a whole nother thing. But totally, like it's amazing now how quickly things can spread. Like you can see something go through TikTok in just like a week.
Yep.
Where it's like all of a sudden everyone's doing something. You're like, where did this come from?
Yeah, I did that this past week with the cheese pickle thing that went
I
around.
haven't even seen it.
You cook cheese, you put garlic salt on it, and then you wrap a pickle into it. And everyone tried it and said, "Oh, it's amazing." So I tried it, and I made a TikTok about it. It was like one of my best performing TikToks.
Dude, that's crazy.
And
it was amazing.
Yeah,
really.
But I love pickles. So
oh, man.
Yeah, see, my wife and I tried the whole fruit roll up and ice cream because fruit roll up, as soon as it freezes, it immediately hardens, so it cracks. So like within seconds. So we like literally put ice cream in the fruit roll up, rolled it up, and then you literally crunch it, and I mean you bite it and it's crunchy within seconds.
That is kind of crazy.
Cool. So the crazy thing is this is a week, right?
Yeah,
it's like go on
is,
for 7-8 days, and then it'll disappear. Kind of like the ice bucket challenge that happened forever ago, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's wild seeing kind of those. And what's so interesting about virality just is like a broader, like not even using it for business, but it's just such an interesting like process. It's a wild that it even happens. But seeing that stuff, like I remember seeing like pretty recently Costin Mayer, those two dances, like
the husband and wife, they're choreographers, right? Yeah.
So they did like this dance to an AJR song, and it immediately like went crazy. Everyone was copying it and trying to recreate the dance, and then it made that song like the top song for AJR like overnight. Like, it became like this huge, and so it's just interesting seeing those ripples that you can have someone who's like, hey, I have this idea. And that's like, I think kind of been what's been fascinating to me kind of from the beginning is like, this is just really interesting. Yeah. And like, can you create that? And it's really hard. It's hard to create it again and again because it's kind of lightning in a bottle. But
so where does the confidence come from in that then? Because, there were all these creative agencies that popped up over Utah with hero videos. Back in the day, Dollar Shave Club was the first one I ever remembered. They came out with this hero video. It blew up. They made millions of dollars. It was his last pennies, right? That he used to do it. And then a few creative agencies that did really good hero videos popped up. But where does the confidence come from that you can make something go viral? And I guess with Color Run, right, you started making videos that started to go viral according to the algorithm at the time.
Yeah.
And then adapting that. So I guess two questions really is one is where does the confidence come from that you can create success with video? And then the other is like, how did you gain that confidence?
Yeah. So I think that kind of how I got there was I was doing after Color Run, I was doing YouTube videos with a friend and we were doing stuff. And just kind of seeing like what worked. And like a lot of times we were just doing stuff like, hey, there's no reason to do this. We're just trying to see if this will go crazy.
Kind of like the what's inside guy, right?
Yeah.
Like early on, he's like, I'm going to cut stuff open and
and just see what it takes.
And see if that works. And I think that's what's interesting is like, for me, I was always more fascinated by like, how do you get things to go viral and how can you leverage that? What's interesting now and where we've really shifted to is after I started Creatably, I was working on campaigns for people, and then I met this guy named Damian Dayton, and he's now one of the partners at Creatably. But Damian and I kind of started talking about like, hey, what's like this whole process? Like, how do you make something go viral? Should we even focus on virality? And what we kind of landed on was we started to instead look at what kind of companies have explosive growth. So even like more than virality, like what companies, what is like the framework or methodology or model, you could say, that explosive growth companies follow. And so Damien had a bunch of ideas around what that looked like, and we kind of fleshed that out, and I added stuff to it, and Damien kept adding stuff to it. And so that's where we kind of went, was what are the companies that we know fit the model of companies that can explode? And then let's provide them the storytelling and creative that will give them that. Oh, wow. And what's interesting now is like, it's so much less reliant on virality now. Like you're really not trying to create virality. That's really not what we do, as much as we're trying to create a campaign that gives them explosive growth. And so usually that has to fit. Like one of those pieces of the model is you need things that are pretty democratic. You usually need stuff that like fits a really broad part of the market
that everybody can respond to, whether it be grandmas versus teenagers.
Yeah. Mm. So then when you do your marketing on social or other places, the likelihood of hitting a potential customer is really high. And so we just started to notice like, okay, that's like one aspect of it. Like even as I look at companies who like Pillow Cube's had amazing growth, but like I talked to a guy the other day, it's like 5 times more revenue than us. And it's like, well, because you just have like the broadest product ever.
Yeah.
Like you have a product that every single guy in America can use. It's a t-shirt company. True Classic. Have you guys ever seen True Classic?
They're like a kind of like a built competitor.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
but and a plain t-shirt fits good.
Yeah.
For bigger guys.
And that's amazing. Like that's what's great is like as you start to get, I feel like as you get deeper into entrepreneurship, you like start to think more about that kind of stuff. Is like, hey, it's not as much like I've figured out how to build something people want. Now, like, how can I build something that like is maybe broader or not as broad? Like you kind of start to engineer the kind of company you want to have, the kind of industry you want to be in. And a lot of times that's interesting because like I don't think about that stuff. Like I didn't get into pillows because I wanted to get into pillows. It was like the last industry I wanted to go into.
See, I'm obsessed with my pillows. So.
No, and I love pillows, but more from like man, there were just so many companies going into it. It was like so competitive.
Yeah.
And it was like everyone was seeing it as this gold rush. And I was like, I really don't want to be in the bedding space, but I have this idea and it seems to work.
Yeah.
So anyways, but yeah, like that's what's really interesting now today about it. And so to probably better answer your question, like I think a lot of that confidence came as we realized like, okay, we know we can blow up this type of company. And then our approach was always like, let's take all of the budget and just make as good of stuff as possible. And I think that's where it's like such a simple lesson for entrepreneurship, but it's like that delayed gratification. Like I was always paying myself like very little, as little as I possibly could, so that most of the budget could go towards making stuff that would get us to that next level.
Yeah.
And then there were also times like there were certain campaigns where we were just very aggressive and like, hey, this is one that's like, we just feel like he's going to kill it. And it's going to be kind of that like piece for us that everyone sees and is going to know. And so we've had some of those where you're like, hey, we really got to invest in this. And so I think like, hopefully that answers that question of like, how do you go and have that confidence? It's like, do great work and like spend as much as you possibly can on doing that great work. And then will build from there. So like in the beginning, it was like, hey, do you have 30 grand for a video? Okay, great. We'll do that.
We'll do it.
And we'll like pull every favor in the book and, try and make the absolute best thing we can. And so I think that like doing that compared to, I've seen people who will take that same budget and will spend half of it on just paying executives. Like now with our bigger budgets that we see, like some of our competitor agencies just spend way too much paying the top people. And so they just don't have the money to do great work. So,
well, and I guess the creative work is done by the talent at the company, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
a lot of that, I guess you could say in your space, it's similar to architecture where somebody hires an architect and then you've got to go get the best people to help you build this infrastructure.
Yeah.
Or else they're going to walk into their house or their office building when it's done and realize, hey, this outlet doesn't work and this wall is uneven.
The scaffold is not so great.
And a beautiful building is a great example of a good architect, right? So it's very similar with creative.
So, and I think that's always what great creative work kind of requires is you got to have that delayed gratification of like every great architect, every great musician was doing great work at a time where it was really hard.
You got to have bounds. Bounds to creativity actually, I think, make you more creative.
Oh, 100%.
For the most part. Yeah.
Like it's amazing. I think that's something that right now we've kind of gotten in this like porn hustle, like hustle porn kind of stuff where it's like, oh, you grind. And everyone asks all these questions like, what should I buy? Like, what mic do I need? What this do I need? What camera do I need? I'm like, bro, none of that matters. Like I always meet camera cinematographer people who are like, do you not own your own like Red? And I'm like, dude, we could shoot a huge video on like any camera. It doesn't have to be like on a Red or Ari or something. Like we do. Yeah. But like that's not what's important. It's like telling the right story and doing the marketing in the right way. And so I think we've gone too far in our culture of like thinking that the tools, and then you'll meet people who will make like a crazy album. Like Billie Eilish, her first album was made in her bedroom. Yeah. Her and her brother were like making it in like this tiny little house.
And I think he still produces her stuff for her.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's always what I try and encourage people is like, don't get so worried about like once circumstances are perfect and ideal, then I'll be able to do great work. It's like great work is always done in difficult circumstances.
Well, and then you look at today and you look at like viral videos today and it's iPhone, it's just, it's very rarely stuff that's been overproduced for the most part. It's stuff that is very consumable to people. I think for the most part, at least of the platforms that they're on. I'm curious too, like obviously with your experience and everything that you've done the last, 10 years or so, there's a framework to going viral for the most part. Obviously it changes, but like break that down, I guess, of what you feel are some of the pieces other than maybe the foundation at the company level. But when it comes to the actual creative, what are some foundational pieces that make a good video viral?
Yeah. So I think the things that really help something, even if you want to go, like I agree with the virality, but even if you want to be more inclusive of like what makes good content, but something that has kind of that explosive potential.
Yeah. I love the way you framed that outside of virality too, where you're like, that's not necessarily the goal, right?
Well, and I sometimes I just think virality is hard because it's like, can you catch lightning in a bottle? It's really hard. And so, but there are certain principles. So I'll give some like good creative.
Yeah.
But like one of them is understanding, especially when you're thinking of an ad, we always think about we're interrupting this person's day. And so we have to entertain them. I think that's one of the biggest things companies struggle with is companies want to be cool often.
For sure.
The founders are like, I want to be seen as cool by my friends. And so they're nervous to make stuff that like is silly or funny or makes it seem like comedic. But when you're interrupting that person, like that's the best thing I've ever found. That's why we use comedy all the time. That's why so many people use comedy in ads. It's so much harder to make an ad that like pulls at the heartstrings that sells a product than it is to just make someone laugh.
Yeah.
So
because it's universal. It's a very universal for the most part. Obviously, everybody has a little bit of a different sense of humor, but humor in general, I think, is universal across any demographic.
Yeah.
So humor is a big piece of that disruption.
Yep. So we're always like, we don't always have to, but like humor, they've been done tons of studies that you will get someone to cry faster if you first get them to laugh than if you just try and get them to cry or to feel sad or kind of like more that emotional side rather than.
Why does that make so much sense?
Dude, it's crazy.
I feel like the times I cry in my life, I'm first laughing my head off.
Yeah.
I think it puts you in that emotional headspace. I mean, there's so much psychology that goes into this, but it puts you in that emotional space. You're already like most people, you're laughing, you're already vulnerable.
Yep.
And you're receptive to change.
But if you try and get someone to like feel emotional, you feel manipulated quickly. And so exactly that. Like you get people to laugh and then get them to feel like an emotional pull. They don't feel manipulated. They feel more open to it. So I think that's like a big one is like, what are you offering the viewer for doing this? I think one of the biggest things I've learned in doing viral things is unexpectedness. I think that's like the core thing is always across the board, which is really hard to create unexpectedness.
Yeah.
But like we have like one of the things that I think really helps, and I saw an interview recently with the founder of Liquid Death where he was talking about the same thing. And we do this in our Creatably retreats with clients. Like we kind of the first retreat we do, we don't ever pitch people creative. We don't like
send you a deck of like, here's what we're thinking.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting.
We instead sit down and say, we have this retreat process where we sit down with them and learn about them and gather data and ask them questions. Yeah. And then one of the things that we do in that first retreat is we play some games around bad ideas. Like what's the worst idea? And you get some really interesting stuff. You get, it like breaks the ice and gets people to start saying, hey, what's the worst idea you've ever had for marketing your company? And that really opens things up. Like the CEO will throw out a horrible idea and everyone's kind of like, oh, okay, like that's super inappropriate or like that's,
it's always inappropriate.
It's inappropriate. Or it's even more just like, that's not kosher. Like no one would be okay with that. It's not something like, that's not how we would talk to customers or we would never be that honest. But like even right now, like it's amazing how that's working. Like this whole uninfluencer movement. I don't know if you've seen uninfluencing. It's like this new movement with influencers where they talk about products they hate rather than products they like.
Oh, okay.
And so it's creating this kind of like shift back to
old days.
Like, yeah, like what if you're having people not talk about how amazing it is, but like even with marketing and starting to be like, how can we be more honest? How can we be more transparent? What can we like kind of admit? So that always opens up some really fun conversations.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the Liquid Death founder was saying is like, they're always trying to think of things that are like, what's a bad idea?
And then they go with all
and then
their
they
bad
do
ideas.
Yeah. They're like, let's have people drink the most expensive drinks on the planet.
Yep.
They're like, I don't know if you've seen that video from Liquid Death, but they were like, we're going to have people drink the most expensive drinks on the planet. And it was like caviar water.
Yeah, just like the most ridiculous stuff.
The most expensive caviar on the planet. And he's like, so the water's worth like $1,000.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, you're going to drink the most expensive drink. And people are blindfolded.
Oh, okay.
And then they drink it and they're like throwing up.
Yeah.
And they're like, now drink Liquid Death and tell us which one you like more. And it's like, oh, I like the Liquid Death more than Squid Ink.
Yeah.
And like they just had him, and it's like that's a really bad idea, but it's a really funny idea. And then they turned it into a great idea.
And it's all about brand placement. They've done some other really fun stuff with like They've also had like kids drink Liquid Death, and it kind of looks like they're drinking beer. They've done like, I mean, they have
just for shock factor.
Yeah, they had like I think like a porn star be their like spokeswoman for a couple ads. They've had like all this crazy stuff, and their merch is insane.
Yeah,
like everything about that brand is about extreme and wild, and it's because Dasani isn't that way. It's because Coke's products in the water space aren't that way, and so they're like, we need to massive brand play, massive brand play.
And I think that's a really important lesson for entrepreneurs, which is like, as an entrepreneur, you have to like zag. As everyone else, there's like that book that talks about this, and that's kind of the whole principle. Is like, as everyone else is zigging, you need to be zagging, and I mean that's Liquid Death right there. It's like everyone would have been terrified. Like Dasani, no one at Coca-Cola would have ever approved those campaigns. There's another one where they got like people who like were always trolling their comment section, and they paid them $1,000 to let them shock them with a taser.
Yeah, they've had some crazy
because they were like what they did is they had them come in and try 7 different waters. And they're like, if you can pick which one is Liquid Death, because you say our water sucks so bad, you can guess
tell the
it.
difference. Yeah,
and if you don't get it, we're gonna shock you.
Funny. That's really
and
funny.
if you get it, we'll give you $1,000.
Yeah,
and they both got shocked.
Well, I know, like,
and I think that's just awesome.
Snowbird did a campaign.
Oh yeah,
that was their negative reviews. But it was a really good negative review. Too much powder, 1 star. And those are the ideas that you bring up to CEOs where I guess the CEOs bring up to you, right? They would say, oh, a bad marketing campaign would be to showcase our worst reviews.
Yeah.
Right? But then they flip that into good. That's kind of what you're saying.
Yep. Yeah. And so it just starts. One of the ones that was always fun to us was like, we were working with Owlet early on, and Owlet at the time was just marketing as like, motherhood is the most beautiful gift.
Really emotional.
And it was like so
very
like
emotional.
Everything was pretty and everything. We called it the glurge. It was just like women and as we talked to women, they're like, I hate that marketing. Like I hate that stuff that like tries to pander to me and is patronizing. And so we started doing. We like got the CEO threw out the idea of like, what if kids are kind of the worst? And it's like, they kind of are the worst. They're kind of horrible little human beings at times. They're also great.
It's very true.
But they're also horrible. And so we did this whole campaign and video about how the kid was like the mean or the monster in a scary movie. Like what if that was the kid, not some monster? It's like, what if the kid is the monster? He's the villain. And that just like opened up a world, and we were able to like talk about a lot of fun ideas. And we did a campaign with Homie about kind of comparing haunted houses. Like no one wants to buy a haunted house, but what if someone did want to buy a haunted house? What would that be like? And what if they were more scared of the process of buying houses than the haunted house? And so we just like played with that idea of like, oh, that's not usually something people would do to sell houses. But I think that that's where all good creative ideas come from, is like, there's kind of like that phrase that like a bad idea looks like a good idea, or a bad idea looks like a bad idea. A good idea looks like a good idea, but a great idea looks like a bad idea. And so how do you get people to kind of come up with that and pull that out of them?
Yeah. And
it's really interesting.
One thing that I've thought about, because Scroll has never offered creative as part of our process, and I think a lot of that comes out of fear and lack of confidence, because I've wondered, how do you price creativity? Because you're not just saying, hey, it's going to cost X amount for this video. There's also so much thought process, psychology,
research, strategy,
research,
so much stuff like that.
How do you build that into a pricing model? That just seems so complex to me.
Yeah, it's honestly, I wish we were like amazing at it. It's hard. It's hard because I think that's one of the things that we haven't traditionally done great at, is explaining like, hey, that's really what you're paying for.
Because they think I'm just getting a high production video shot on a red, right? But, but you're
like
saying
hundreds of hours of research. Like I would say probably, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, like 75% of like the total man hours are pre-video.
Oh,
and
totally.
all the research.
Yeah. It's all the, It's all like the IP around like, how do we edit? I mean, there's just so many things we've learned of like, how do you edit? How do you do captions? How do you do hooks? How do you want the pacing to be? How do you want the flow to be? How do you grab someone's attention in the first 5 seconds? That's different if you're using YouTube versus Facebook versus Instagram versus TikTok. And so there's just a lot of stuff. And I think that's something like, I would say my general principle is work with people who understand that they're paying for your expertise. Like there's a story about Pablo Picasso, you may have heard it before, where this lady saw him in, I think he was in Italy, I don't know, somewhere in Europe. And she saw him, was like, hey, can you draw me a picture? And he was like, sure. And he like drew her a picture in 2 minutes. And she was like, oh, that's amazing. Like, that's so great. How much? And he was like, $60,000. And she was like, but it only took you 2 minutes. And he was like, no, but it took me 50 years to learn how to do it in 2 minutes. And that's what you're paying for. And I think that that's like, so my general principle is try to avoid working with people who don't want to pay for that expertise.
Yeah.
Who want to say like, hey, what's the time? There's a great video on YouTube which kind of goes over this with logos.
Is it Christo?
I think so. Is he the one at the chalkboard?
Yes, and he's got a beanie. Christo's the master with pricing creative work.
Yes.
He's like pioneered the proper way to do it. He's amazing.
Yeah. So, but he talks about a lot of those principles. Like, so if I can do it fast, but you still love it, you want to pay me less?
Yeah, that doesn't
like,
work.
Why don't you want to pay me more because I'm fast? And it's like, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think I have seen that video.
Yeah, Christo's awesome.
So I think that's a lot of it. And a lot of that comes to like creating processes that are repeatable. So that people, it's like, hey, we're not charging you for our time. We're charging you for our process and our intellectual property. Like how we do this is really what we're charging for.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that that's a very good way to go about it. And something that I've learned with Scroll, I mean, we're only 4 years into this, still young and figuring it out, but learning to say no to certain customers has been
it's been
really
valuable,
rewarding, and helping us move forward with clients that are aligned with us. So
we're
sure you do a lot of that.
Yeah,
we're to a place now where we can do that. Like you're saying, like at the beginning, you're taking the $30,000 jobs, right? It's like, hey, we just need to we need to do this. We're going to do it in the most creative way possible. I think there's a time and place for both. Yeah. There's a time and place for, we need the revenue in order to survive. And then that comes a time of, we know our lane and we're sticking to it.
Yeah.
And this is how we deliver. So I guess, how was it how did you make that jump? I guess, if that makes sense.
No, yeah. So I think right before, it was kind of probably like a couple months before I started Creatably, I went and had lunch with Jason Bangeter, who started Struck. And I was kind of asking him questions. And that was kind of one of his key points, was like, look, you need to kind of split your clients into 2 buckets in the early days. One is like they're paying the bills, and the other is like they're building our portfolio. And you're just going to have those 2 types of clients early on. And you need to just embrace that. Like, if you try and do like award-winning work for every single client, you're just not going to make it. It's just not going to be possible. So you need to kind of make those choices. And again, you're not doing bad work for the other people, but you're not like losing. Like there's a difference. Campaigns in our first 2-3 years where we lost money, because it was like, we're spending every single dollar of this campaign on making this unbelievable.
Yeah. Because you want their brand to represent your brand.
Yep. Yeah. And so I think that's just like kind of a reality. We, like most of our campaigns, were kind of in that realm though. Like we were pretty picky kind of from the beginning, but I do think that there's those times where you kind of do stuff that's like, this isn't the perfect fit, but they need help and they're a good client, and let's do that. But then there's times where you're like, hey, this is like the one to make our name on this year.
Yeah.
So like one of those for us was Manly Bands. We did like a campaign, and it's still probably one of my favorite Creatably videos. Like several of the videos.
These are the ring guys, right?
Yes,
they do like all the different creative materials
in
the bands.
Yep. And they do like partnerships. But like the main video is about like this husband or like these fiancés that are getting rings, and the girl's been dreaming about it her whole life, and it's just a hilarious video. There's so many funny. It's super inappropriate. It's great. And then we also did for them a Lord of the Rings parody. I don't know if you've seen that.
That's awesome. I don't think I've seen that one. I saw the other one with the guys, but
yeah, it's like just talking about like there's 8 normal guys and 3 blue collar workers. And,
I love
so
it.
it's like a
That's
direct,
cool.
and it was like a shot for shot remake of the intro of Lord of the Rings.
That's awesome.
But with guys, like normal guys.
Yeah. No cease and desist from.
Oh no, parody law.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There you go.
Yeah,
it's true.
We're parodying it. So, but yeah, like that's. You kind of have those campaigns every once in a while. So that's something that I would say for agency people, for agency owners, is like you just kind of have to decide that. And that was really good advice from Jason of, look, you kind of have to know, and you just got to be super scrappy. And those first couple of years of building an agency are really hard because you're like, and I had the luck of like being able to use some of my prior work as kind of like, hey, there's other stuff I've done.
Yeah.
But that's what's hard. It's not, I think this is where entrepreneurship is in general, is I always compare it to like, you're walking into like the most crowded room you've ever seen, and no one wants you to let you in the room. It's like wall to wall people. Yeah. And you're trying to like push into this room, and everyone's like, no, leave. We don't want you here. We don't want another person coming in here. Yeah. And that's what entrepreneurship is like. And then once you get in, it's kind of becomes easier because you can you get into the middle and you're like, oh, there is some space in here. Yeah. The room isn't as full as it looked from the outside, but from the outside, it looked like it was totally packed. And that's because no one's going to make it easy for you to start a business. And so that's what's hard. But that's kind of what I would say to make it easier. And then over time, you get way pickier. You start being more selective with clients. You can hopefully get to the point where you're auditioning them as much as they're auditioning you. It's kind of like, you seem like a nightmare to work with.
Yeah, not a good fit.
We had one of those last week.
Yeah.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
It was an easy separation.
Yeah. And that's, I think, also where you start to just realize, like, I think that's one of the things kind of from day one that I just was like, I'm not going to work with a company that like sells crappy stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
so it was all kind of been a product.
Yeah. So it was always us and analyzing them and saying like, is this a company that I know I can blow up or create good results for?
And that comes down to like what we were talking about at the beginning, like the foundation. You really have to look at their product. Obviously, they're not going to blow up if they have a crappy product.
Yeah.
Like everybody that you guys have worked with have had a like super interesting product. It's kind of come back to those, I guess, like 4 or 5 things you mentioned. It's like they've got a good product. They have some kind of mission or vision that makes sense. It relates to, the broader demographic. So you don't have to target anybody really specifically. And then you are able to add humor. And those four things, that's really the kind of the key for you guys.
Yep.
And is that how Pillow Cube came about then? The Pillow Cube was an original idea of yours where you just thought, make a pillow a square, and because that's going to be more of a unique concept for people when they see it to say, oh, this is different, unique. I could blow something like this up. Or what brought that idea to the forefront of your mind?
Yeah, so it was an idea I had as a kid. I had a friend growing up who was half Japanese. His mom was from Japan. And she made a comment at one point about how as a kid her dad would make like wood boxes for them to sleep on and wrap them in a towel. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then I later in college did research and was like, oh, there's pillows of all shapes and sizes outside the US. The US is so hyper focused on this one shape. But if you go to Tonga, they have these little boxes that they make. And then they use banana leaves to kind of create it's almost like a little hammock for your head. It's pretty wild. And so I just always thought of that. And then I had a friend who had an IKEA couch with that kind of flat rectangular armrest, and I just would take naps on. I'm like, dude, this couch is amazing. Like, why aren't pillows like this?
Yeah.
And I have broad shoulders, and so it was just always the worst. And then we were looking at doing some work for a bunch of different mattress companies. We were kind of talking to 3 or 4 of them. They were all sending us samples of foam. And I had like thought that like you couldn't make a pillow. Like I really did. Like in college, I even was like, I wonder if I could like make a box and then wrap it in foam.
Interesting.
Because I just didn't think foam could be firm enough.
Yeah.
And so all these companies were sending us different foam samples, and they were like really high-end memory foam. So like memory foam that has like adaptive response. So like the more you push on it, the more it pushes back. They had copper in it. They had graphite in it.
CBD.
Like different things. Yeah. Like all of these additives. Yeah. But I took 2 of these samples that were 12 by 12 by 3, and I put 2 of them together and laid down and was like, oh my gosh, that's like the pillow I've always wanted. And so it really wasn't like super strategic. Like that's where it was like,
it just kind of like fell into your, it kind of almost fell into your lap.
Yeah. So then I like spray glued those 2 pieces of foam together.
That's amazing.
I hired a seamstress to make a cover, and I was just like showing people. And one of the things I really liked about it was people would see it and they're like, that's like the stupidest idea you've ever had. Like that's really dumb.
Yeah.
I love the input.
Yeah. And then people would like lay on it and be like, oh my gosh, that's really comfortable though. And I liked that it was like something that looked silly and seemed silly. And then once you tried it,
it actually is amazing.
Yeah. So then I made like 20 samples, and I gave them out to a bunch of friends and family. And I was trying to figure out like, how do I ask them whether it's great without asking them that? Cause like, of course my mom's going to tell me she loved it, and my like best friends.
Yeah.
So I just asked everyone like, hey, I need those back. Like after a week, I was like, I need those back. I have to give them to other people. And like no one would give it back.
And then
everyone was like, I was like, oh, we're on to something.
Yeah.
And that was what was really interesting to me. It wasn't like we were kind of talking as a team, because we were talking about how I wanted to start a brand. I was like, I want to start something. We've learned so many lessons from these great entrepreneurs that we've worked with. Like, I think we should apply them. And so I was wanting to start a brand, but everyone's like, dude, mattresses is like so crowded. Pillows is so crowded.
Everything. Gotta love input.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was like 20 mattress brands.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there still are, but they've whittled down. But like, I felt like 5-6 years ago.
Oh,
it was like the thing. Like everybody, like Lucid, Bamboo, blah, 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 this. Like you name it, everybody was getting into it.
Yep. Yeah. So that was something that for me was like, I don't know. But we just kind of launched it on Kickstarter. We're like, let's just see. Maybe it's like a nice little side hustle. And we launched on Kickstarter, and it did okay. Like nothing crazy. We did 40 grand on Kickstarter. It's like nothing.
What was your goal?
10.
Oh, okay.
So it was like nothing to be like pumped about. It's not like we raised $1 million or something. And then we did like 120 grand the next month on Indiegogo. And then we just like kind of let it run as we were getting the initial order in. And we probably did like 50 to 60 grand a month. And then the first order came in December of 2019. And we started shipping products. And then we like launched a new version that was wider. It was just more shaped like a normal pillow. That was just feedback from people like, hey, I love it when I'm on my side, but then it's like falling off of a cliff.
Yeah.
Off of this tiny little pillow. So we're like, oh, that's a good point. So we then launched like a new version of it. And that's where like, we're like, oh, we're doing like a couple thousand a day, 5,000 a day. Then it went to like 10,000 a day. And like 15 and 20. I was like, dude, we should probably focus on this.
Is this all through organic, or were you running ads?
This was paid. It was a lot of paid.
With your creative that you guys had built for it.
Yep. Yeah. But it was just like working, and it was like, man, this is crazy. And so as we started to see that grow and scale, it was like, we should focus on this. Like it's really great. So that's really, and I still use a lot of those things. Like when we look at any company, that's still one of our first tests is like, hey, send us a bunch of product, and then we go put it in feedback. Like all the offices of like Pillow Cube and Creatably and Stairside, and I just put it in the middle before I even give feedback. I just like put it in the middle of the lobby and just see if it disappears.
Interesting.
And if it doesn't, that's like super concerning for me.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, if we give 100 people the opportunity to take free stuff, and they don't. They're like, I don't want it. I don't even want it for free.
And not only, they're not just any random people too. They're people that have had that they've been exposed to all of these kind of products. So it's, I think, even better, like use case. If those people aren't touching it, then no one's going to touch it.
And there can be exceptions where it's like, hey, that just might not be their audience, but it most of the time rings pretty true.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like test 1. And then test 2 is, what's feedback? What do people think? Do they like it? When they use it, sometimes we've had people like, oh, I want one of those. That's amazing. And then they take it home. They're like, it kind of doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or they're making a lot of claims that I don't think they can hold up.
Fit.
So
that's really interesting. I think there's multiple ways to approach business, right? You can approach it from, I want to be 3rd, 4th, or 5th in the space and just carve out my own piece, right? I mean, we're in the agency space. There's 100,000 digital marketing agencies. So we just got to find a way to make ourselves a little bit unique, or find that unique approach that we can take that makes us interesting. And a lot of that has come from our culture and what we stand for. And I think that makes brands a little bit more interested. But there's kind of 2 approaches where if you were to go and put a knockoff of a Minky blanket in the office, and a lot of people would just be like, oh, another blanket in the office. You're not starting a wildly successful independent brand with that. So that's what's kind of cool, is you've taken the unique approach of saying, we're going to focus on products that have almost that 0 to 1 methodology that Peter Thiel talks about. Like Pillow Cube's a great example of, looks completely different from a normal pillow. So people are going to be like, oh, initially that looks kind of weird, but it looks weird for a reason.
Yeah.
Like, what's the reason it looks weird?
Yeah.
And there's nothing like it. Yeah.
I used a Pillow Cube for the first time camping.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, this is a great pillow for camping because it's small and compact. It was the square.
Yeah.
And I had forgotten one. My dad had like 4 Pillow Cubes in his camper.
So sounds like your dad. I haven't used one yet.
Dude, memory foam while camping and not taking up too much space. I don't know. There might be something there.
Yeah. No, it's
you can come up with a small travel version if you don't already have something.
We're launching a travel version this fall.
Cool.
That like comes with a compression bag so you can roll it up. And,
sweet.
Because that's like one of the biggest requests. People are like, hey, I love it, but I need to take it on my my trips and when I go. I can't sleep without one. So
I'm that way too. Like every time I go on a trip, even if I'm in a bed 10 times more comfortable than mine, hotels have the worst pillows. You need to get hooked up with Marriott or something. Yeah. And
the problem is they all spend no money on their pillows.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
they spend 0.
We talked to Delta at one point, and they were like, "Oh, we love it," and put it in first class.
Yeah,
we're like, "Oh, how much are you guys spending on?" Your first class pillow.
Pennies.
And it was 80 cents.
Yeah.
But if you go into first class now, they literally have a Pillow Cube knockoff.
Oh, really?
Interesting.
Yeah. So first class at Delta now has it's like a cube shaped bag full of just fluff, but it looks like a Pillow Cube. But it's so soft that when you lay on it, it's it
just
kind of pointless. But
well, I guess you have to approach the luxury brands or something, huh?
Yeah.
I'm on Jerry's of the hotel world or whatever.
Yep.
So to kind of wrap this up, I'd love to get an understanding of what advice do you have for young entrepreneurs, and specifically since we have you here, for us, starting and growing our company, and we'd love to get into the consumer product goods space eventually and utilize our firm to do that. So what advice do you have for people like us that are trying to get into that?
Yeah. So I would say my first piece of advice is always follow things that you're excited about and that you're interested in. And that you really can see hey, this is something that people love. That's always one of my biggest kind of investing hacks is when people come to me and they're like, we're going to be billionaires. I'm like, you're not going to make it. It just always happens. Anytime someone's talking about the money, it's dude, being an entrepreneur is a really tough way to make money. It's a very difficult space. It's high risk, high reward. And so I always love when people approach it instead from like, hey, I love the craft. Like, I love building companies. I would do it for free. I do it for free. I love helping people be like, I love helping other people. And I also start companies that don't work. And so, like everyone has those failures. And so you have to love doing it. And so then I would say for young entrepreneurs, like just do something. I think too often people get stuck in like, what's the best idea? What's the thing that's going to make me the most money? What's the thing that's going to be huge? And it's like, just do something. Like, I didn't think Pillow Cube was going to be a thing that now has like 50 employees, you know? Wow. It's like, I just was like, oh, it's kind of cool. Yeah. And it just organically became that. So as agency owners, my advice is like, just create something that's very different from agency and try it. Like, try some consumer product and you'll learn a bunch. You'll learn, about ideas and how to come up with good ideas and what do people want. But follow those steps of like, get something, see if people want it, take it away. Or try to take it away, see if they resist. And if they do, it's like, okay, now try and get them to pull out a credit card as soon as possible. Like everything we do, we are always trying to see, like, can I get someone to pull out their card now and pay for it as quickly as possible? Like the sooner you can get to the test of, can I have it back? And then the test of, will you pay for it? Like the better. Every single business we now incubate and start, those are the two things I want to get to as quickly as possible. Try and come up with something that you're like, hey, I'm excited about this. I think this could have an impact. Could be something that's new and different. Don't make Me Too stuff. It's the worst. And then just like see if people like it. Test it quickly as possible. Like Pillow Cube was legitimately a $50 prototype. I mean, it was just so simple. And I wasn't going out and then trying to say, and it was also like, I wasn't trying to go out and figure out like, is this $1 billion company? Like, it was just like, do people like this thing? Yeah. Stair slide was the same thing. Like when I first saw the stair slide, like the second I saw it, I was like, oh, I can sell that. Like, I just know. I know I can pitch. Kids. Oh yeah. Like I have 4 daughters and I was like, they would love this thing. It would keep them busy. They would play with it all the time. And so that, like, I kind of separate, and that's also where I kind of separate, like, ideation is kind of where people typically like going in entrepreneurship. But one of the best things about starting an agency is it's much more like learning how to run a company. There's so many other parts of being an entrepreneur, like billing and invoicing and managing employees and hiring and how do you sell, how do you price, like all of those things. And I feel like typically what we encourage young people to do is start with ideation, which is the hardest part of entrepreneurship. It's really hard to come up with good ideas. It is. Yeah. And
it takes a lot of time. You may as well start executing. Yes. Execution's everything at the end of the day.
So I'm definitely a little, it's definitely kind of my opinion and I'm a little jaded towards this, but I definitely love more the approach of like, just start a business where you can make some money. That's why I loved doing service work, because it was like, hey, you get paid up front and you get paid to do work, and then it gives you freedom. Being able to spend, like, we had a client who needed to push a shoot back, and then it was like, hey, we've got like a week. We don't have anything planned this week. Like, we have work to do, but we could spend like most of this week, and that's the week we did the Pillow Cube Kickstarter. Oh, wow. It was just like, we have kind of a free week. Let's just do it this week. And so we got it done in a week and then launched it like 2 months later. And
that's pretty
cool. That's something that
cool.
You don't have. Like when I was in school trying to come up with ideas, it was like, okay, I've got this great idea. Like, how do we do it?
And you're like, instead of just
doing it. We have no money.
Yeah.
We have no resources. I don't know any investors.
For sure.
And it's like, instead, if you build a service business where you can just have some of that stuff, now you all of a sudden you have a team, you have some free cash. It's like you could probably throw in some money on an idea. And so that's where I always tell brand new like college students, like, hey, don't think that the first step to being an entrepreneur is being the founder CEO who comes up with ideas. Yeah. Like my first step is like, build just some kind of company that can make money or go work at a startup. I think those are two things that are much better to do first. because you just start learning those things and you start having some of those lessons. Ideation, like I said, is really hard. It's hard to come up with brand new ideas.
Yeah.
Every headspace for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to find the time. It's hard to find the time exists, but it's hard to say, I'm going to plan ideation. Like what a weird way to view it, you know?
When
it's almost like planning meditation in a sense.
And when you're worried about so many other things, like if you have your basic things taken care of, it's much easier, I think, to have the headspace to do it. So,
and that's what I always now what I am always looking for is I'm always just looking for friction. Like, where is there friction? And I think that's a key thing is like, if for you guys, if you're like, hey, we now have this agency, we have employees, we have more headspace because our necessities are taken care of. That's where I would start is like, where do you see friction around you? Where do you see everyone going this way and you can go the opposite way? And so that's what I just kind of keep an eye out for. And I'm always just writing down ideas of like, interesting. Everyone's going this way with this thing and no one's doing this. Or a parallel industry, which I think is ahead of us in this thing, went this way and it worked really, 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 really well. So we should now take this industry and do the same.
The same thing.
I like that. I actually recently was thinking about that in the agency space because we don't take on a lot of e-commerce. We've always been lead gen and work with service businesses, but we are potentially acquiring an e-commerce agency. And as I look at it and I look at all the e-commerce agencies around us, they're all charging percentages or like these tiered plans. And it almost made me want to cause friction or, you know, zag where they're zigging because I thought, why don't we just charge a flat rate for everyone? Like, doesn't matter if you're Coca-Cola or Thread Wallets. Like, we're just going to charge a flat rate and disrupt the industry because I have never met an agency that does a flat rate.
Yeah.
So, that was like a small ideation that I thought that maybe this would work and we could really change the game, you know, that like homey approach almost to the agency world. So
dude, it's always just looking for those things. It's really fascinating. And, that's what it's amazing how it works all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Liquid Death going back to that.
Yeah.
We actually just launched our own ice cream brand.
I saw that. The cold case, right?
Yeah.
Cold case ice cream.
Delivered to your house. And the idea was very similar. We like saw, hey, this is really popular in other
categories.
The experiential is like really big. And then our other thing that we're doing is every month we have 6 new flavors.
Oh, so
and so no one in ice cream is doing that. Everyone in ice cream is like same flavors for years.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we're like, people are like, that's insane. How are you doing that? How are you coming up with 6 new flavors? And we're like, we already have like 100.
Yeah.
And so we're just, and we want to get to the point where we're doing it weekly or twice a month.
I was gonna say, and the whole true crime right now is like huge. It's a massive, just, I guess, little maybe micro industry. I don't know. I wouldn't maybe consider true crime an industry you want to get into, but it's very something that a lot of people are talking about. A lot of people are interested in.
It's my wife's favorite thing on the planet.
Yeah. So I think it's really cool that like you've got all of your flavors almost have a little story attached to every single one of them, and I think it's really cool.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we have loved having you on, and honestly, very helpful for us because I feel like you're years ahead of us on what we would like to get into in the future. So seriously appreciate it.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having me.
Jay.
Feels like we could have paid you thousands of dollars
for this podcast.
I'll send you an invoice.
Send us an invoice, Jay.
The Dr. Pepper was more than enough payment.
Well, that's good.
We'll buy 100 pillow cubes for that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely buying a pillow cube. I need to try it, but
that's awesome.
Anyways.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. We don't have like a massive outro or anything,
but we'd love for like, if you want people to find you, this is the time to kind of plug your personal brand if you'd like.
Yeah. So probably the best thing is just to go to our brands. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Jay Davis. So follow me on LinkedIn and then go to any of our brands and see if there's a product you love. And we do have coldcaseicecream.com is the new ice cream brand. It's super fun.
Is that only delivered in Utah or
No, it's delivered across the country. So
Awesome.
And it's kind of like it's ice cream that are flavors you've never tried. Like one of them is black licorice and pineapple base, which is crazy.
Whoa.
It sounds weird, but it's really good. And then blue cornmeal cornbread with brown sugar, and then like a Meyer lemon drizzle. So
Ooh,
it's wild.
yummy.
Okay.
And then there's some like
try it.
there's some more normal like Biscoff with sweet cream and some stuff like that. So honeycomb.
Oh,
Very cool.
So there's some more normal flavors, and
Yeah,
then there's some like
experimental
really
ones.
crazy stuff. And that's each drop every month will be kind of that same, like something that's a little more standard up to the craziest ice cream you've ever eaten.
It kind of reminds me of the new there's that like luxury cookie brand. It's like $300.
Last Crumb.
Yeah, Last Crumb. I
Yeah.
couldn't remember the name, but yeah, very similar.
Yep.
So anyways,
Cool.
Cool.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Jake.
having me.